In local matters, Florida reaches another grim milestone, reporting 173 coronavirus deaths on Thursday. That unfortunately sets a new state record for the highest single daily death toll. It comes the same day Florida also confirmed more than 10,000 new cases, bringing the total to more than 389,000. The surge in numbers is causing critics to push back on a state mandate requiring schools to reopen for 5 days a week in the fall. For more, let's bring in Jim Defede. He's an investigative reporter for our CBS news station in Miami. Jim, so good to have you with us. You have, first of all, some new reporting on the president's new decision to cancel the RNC in Jacksonville. What can you tell us?
So there were a number of factors that went into the president's decision to cancel the Jacksonville portion of it. I'm told by reliable sources that in addition to the health concerns, which were serious and legitimate, you also had issues with a number of members of Congress and other high-ranking officials just not being willing to attend. You also had the sheriff in Duval County around Jacksonville say he could not keep the facility safe. And I can tell you that I know from the governor's schedule that the governor spoke to both the vice president and the president last night, and he talked to the mayor of Jacksonville today. So you can sort of see a number of things were taking place. And one thing that I was told as well is fundraising for the RNC convention in Jacksonville was not going well. There were serious problems in being able to raise the money necessary to hold the event. And the final straw may have been tomorrow, city officials and county officials in Jacksonville were scheduled to hold a meeting where they were going to raise those concerns even more about the ability of them to hold their event. So the president, the timing of this may be tied to other things rather than just the coronavirus.
Jim, this is so interesting. I want to follow up with you a little bit on this point. We know that the RNC and the DNC always choose cities that they're hoping that they're going to win in the November election, or states that are crucial to them. How do you think the president's decision to cancel the Florida component of the RNC is going to play with voters there? Positive because it seems like he's taking the coronavirus more seriously, or negative because he's changing everything up at the last minute?
I don't think it hurts him in terms of, I don't know how much of a bump he was going to get holding the convention in Jacksonville, the way you normally get a bump, like if he had held it in North Carolina with all the attendant pageantry that would have went there. The idea of Jacksonville, one of the things that the president's campaign actually wanted by holding it in Jacksonville that was underlooked was it's right on the border with Georgia, and Georgia has become a bit of a threat to the president, a bit of concern. So they were hoping to get multiple media markets there. They're not going to get that. Look, Florida is going to be in play. I know that there have been some polls that came out today that expressed a very wide lead for Joe Biden in Florida. I don't know anybody in Florida who thinks it's going to be a decisive win either way. I think in Florida, we're used to our elections coming down to razor-thin margins of 1 or 2%. I think Florida is going to be that way as well. And I think the president knows he's got to fight to win Florida.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about schools opening up in Florida. You've spoken with the president of the Florida Education Association about this question. What are some of the biggest concerns among teachers about going back as the state continues to see massive spikes in coronavirus cases?
So the Governor Ron DeSantis, and the state's education secretary issued an order earlier this month requiring that all schools open brick and mortar classrooms, at least 5 days a week for students to attend. Now, that caused a lot of consternation, particularly among the teachers union, the Florida Education Association, who early this week filed a lawsuit against the governor saying that order was unconstitutional and violated Florida's constitution to provide safe environments for students. So now what you've got is the governor is backpedaling a little bit. But in talking to the Florida Education Association president, as I did today, he says that teachers are just scared. Cafeteria workers are scared. Bus drivers are scared. He talked to me about how we have folks like that filling out wills. He's seen an increase in the number of teachers and staff who are retiring because they don't want to place themselves in that sort of jeopardy. So it's a continuing thing. You know, a number of school districts are also pushing back. In Florida, you know, Miami-Dade, the largest school district. You've got Broward, which is another huge school district. They're both saying they will not open brick and mortar schools in that way. They will do online learning for the foreseeable future. defying the governor, and all of that is still being played out. But for teachers and parents, it's a real concern. And one last point I'll make, I thought the president's press conference today revealed something very interesting about this that you've also heard from Governor DeSantis. There's almost a play here that if public schools won't open, then they'll start trying to find ways to take those federal dollars and state and local dollars and send them to private charter schools. Give the money to parents to be able to take them to religious institutions and private charter schools, which would be very interesting, if that turns out to be the case, if that's really the ultimate gambit here to try to force some of those public dollars into those types of schools.
Well, charter schools are public schools, but
right.
but correct in terms of in many ways that they have different oversight. Well, let's also talk about the Florida Education Association's lawsuit. They're actually suing the governor and the State Department over that mandate. Can you break down the lawsuit a little bit more for us, and do you think that they'll be successful?
Lawsuits like this are difficult, not the least of which because what you have is in Florida. One of the advents of Governor Ron DeSantis being elected in Florida is he appointed a majority of justices to the Florida Supreme Court. So you had a Florida Supreme Court that was very pro-labor and more liberal, and that is now very conservative and tends to be anti-labor. So if this case were to make it to the Florida Supreme Court, it may be difficult for teachers union to prevail. But again, their main argument is the Constitution demands that the state provide a safe environment for its citizens, particularly in school systems, and that by not having a plan, by not having the types of resources that school districts need, whether it's plexiglass partitions, the adequate number of PPE, even guidelines about how to keep students socially distant, if the state and the federal government aren't providing those plans to the schools, then that's a serious problem, and the schools can reopen and should not be required to reopen, in the union's opinion.
So overall, how do Florida residents feel about how their governor is handling the pandemic, how local leaders are handling the pandemic, and do you think that any of that will have an effect in how they vote in November?
Well, I think it's very interesting. Governor Ron DeSantis came into office, and one of the things that he did in the first year and a half of his administration was he struck a very populist chord. He really tried to move to find issues that would work across a spectrum. For instance, he became an outspoken advocate for Everglades and the environment. And so that swayed some Democrats. He's still very conservative, as I said, his judicial appointments and some of the other moves that he made, but he had extended an olive branch. Once the coronavirus hit, you saw a very different Ron DeSantis. And one of the things that you saw was a lack of really, for lack of a better word, leadership. The state refused to take responsibility, almost in the same way that the federal government said it was up to states to handle the coronavirus as they saw fit. The governor, in turn, said it's up to local cities and counties to handle it on their self. So you ended up having a patchwork system where some cities had mandatory mask requirements and curfews, and other cities, maybe bordering those cities, didn't. You had one county doing something, another county didn't. There continues to be an outcry for the governor to move forward with a mandatory statewide mask order. He refuses to do that, even after a state like Texas, did the same thing. Other states have done the same thing. I think Florida is one of only a dozen states that did not require mandatory mask wearing when you can't socially distance. And so those issues, I think, are affecting the governor's standing, where you saw a lot of governors across the country benefit from their handling of the coronavirus and go up in popularity. The governor's numbers actually went down in the aftermath, and I'm not sure they've gotten any better since.
All right, Jim Defede, thank you for joining us.